Hi there, my name is Abraham, and I'm going to be doing a technical interview video for prep week number one. And I'm going to be answering three questions that have been asked from a software engineer in technology. So let's go ahead and get started. The first question is, why move from CBS and spreadsheets to an RDBMS? So in a quick answer, this is a scenario that I would give the senior engineer. Um, you think of everything, you think of it, so you can think of it as a spreadsheet and as a digital piece of paper. It basically lets you write anything, anywhere. So that's great for a grocery list, but it's dangerous for project data. When you move to a database, RDBMS, you're moving into a system that has what we call data integrity. The three bullet points that I would want to explain to the engineer are these three bullet points, the schema. So the schema basically, or you want to call it a set of rules, basically has a set of rules. So an example would be if there needed to be some sort of number to be put into a date, you would actually have to put in a number and not like put in something like TDB to be determined. So that is basically supporting and following integrity. There's another bullet point that I would probably explain to the senior engineer, and it would be relationships. Instead of duplicating a client's address 50 times when using CSV, you only have to store it once and you link it. And whenever you have to update the database for a client's address or phone number or database, or excuse me, or date of birth, or actually that would not be a good example. Maybe someone's phone number or their address or something like that, then you would only need to do it once, and that one time would go ahead and fill in all the other gaps if this patient or this person had like multiple accounts or something. What it's basically saying is that it cuts down the time that you would have to do something that should only take one time. And if you're using something like a CSV, you might be inclined to have to do it like 50 times. So, of course, that would be rather redundant. All right, so that's how I would answer the question for number one. Let's go on to question number two, the architectural question. So I'm being asked, when should we choose SQL as a relational over over NoSQL, which is a non-relational? I would basically lean toward the relational database. When you're actually looking for like perfection, structure, consistency, you want something that's going to have a relational database environment. There are two bullets that I want to emphasize on that I would answer to the the tech engineer in technology. If you have like complex joins, like inner joins, right joins, left joins, and they require a lot of extra clicks or different groups of data matching together, you want something that is going to manage or is going to act like a relational database. For example, Amazon, which is an e-commerce. You get your product, you see something on one page, you go to the next page, you order on the next page, and you go to the next page and you do your payments. You want something that's going to be able to relate to have relational database fundamentals and that are going to make that whole experience effortless. You would probably achieve that if you went, toward the route of a relational database. One more thing that is mentioned that I'd like to include in my answer for question number two is acid compliance. So this is kind of just a fancy word, basically saying accuracy. Um, you want to make sure that This is kind of an interesting example that I'm going to give you. So I'm just going to read it off the piece of paper. If you're dealing with a financial transaction or any data where a decimal point being off is a disaster, meaning that it's not a red flag, but it prevents that transaction from moving forward or it prevents some sort of like process. Um, SQL is the industry standard. So using SQL is the industry standard because it guarantees the data is processed reliably every single time. So once again, that kind of gives you an example of what asset compliance is. Um, Now I'm going to go on to question number three, which is a question is called, well, it's titled Infrastructure, the infrastructure question. So I'm being asked on-premise versus managed cloud, what are the trade-offs? So the question you need to ask yourself is where do you want your team to spend all of their brain power? That's what I would ask myself if I was debating on if I want to do a on-premise or a managed cloud. So there are two bullet points that I want to emphasize on. The so managed clouds, which for an example would be AWS, Google Cloud, or Google Cloud SQL. They follow what they call a shared responsibility model. So what they're saying is that the provider, which in this case, let's say example, Google, they're going to handle all the boring stuff. That means the hardware, the power, the cooling, the automated backups, and security patches. All we have to focus on is just the data. It's incredibly easy to scale, and that is a very big advantage to doing a managed cloud. Now, if you want versus like on-premise, this gives you a little bit more control. So it gives you actually about 100% control. You own the hardware. Um, your data never leaves the building. Especially this is really good if you have high security industries. The trade-off is like there's not a human resource department. You need a team that's going to be 24/7 to kind of help you get around. Sometimes with these, you may not get that. So tech help and all that kind of stuff might be a little bit more limited. So looks like both might be okay, but I think everyone would probably say that the more beneficial one would be like a managed cloud. Um, I think that would probably be the best bet. But also, again, you're also dealing with the size of the company, what product or what's the database, what sort of environment is the database created from, what is it marketing? So those are some different variables. So there you go. I have answered the three questions that are required for this tech interview prep week number one. There was a lot of information that I presented to you. This was a mock interview, meaning that I was answering these questions as if I was in a actual interview with an actual interviewer. All right. Well, this concludes my video for week number one, the prep interview and I will be logging out from here. Thank you for your time.